I'm really excited to invite our guest this morning, Alecs Donovan, who is a former Welsh rugby player, only recently retired. She's also a yoga teacher and founder of Yogability, and also a powerful advocate of mental health and well-being. So good morning, Alecs. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
That's okay. So have you done your early morning yoga? Because you do that on Instagram, am I right in thinking that?
Well, yeah, so I've actually just finished my 4th class of the day. So yeah, I've done a bit this morning, but yeah, so initially I was doing it all on Instagram. I started just doing live classes in lockdown, but now we've actually got an online kind of portal and an online platform, so I do most of it through that now.
That's fantastic. And people sort of sign up for that, is it? Obviously, and just
yeah,
like a course, or just dip in and out.
Yeah, so it's a monthly subscription, so they pay a certain amount a month. So they pay $17.99 a month, and at the moment we've got about 12 classes on a week. So they can either jump onto the live classes that we stream, so we record everything live, or that they can access them at any point. So it gets saved to almost like this live stream library. So it's up to them. A lot of people, when I do the morning ones, they're like, no chance I get enough. So they just do it later, so yeah.
I love that live stream library. That could be the new phrase. I love that. and do you find that demand is growing or has grown over the pandemic for people?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think, to be honest, I never even considered going online. Just before the pandemic, I actually opened 2 yoga studios in Cardiff. So I never really considered going online. I always taught, people face to face. And then during lockdown, it sounds really dramatic, but when when we were closed, I woke up in the morning and I was like, I don't actually need to, I have nothing to get up for in with regards to work, because then I had nothing to do. And a lot of my friends in the industry were the same. And because yoga, you don't really need any equipment, you can literally just use the floor. Then I was like, oh, shall I just do a live class every day, and you guys can jump in, and there'll be like a social thing that we do together. And well, they kind of asked me about it, and it ended up there was like 140 people just all over the world that would jump onto the lives in the morning, and I ended up doing 100 free ones. And then I could tell there was almost like a gap in the market where, actually people, like, yoga's probably something that people could continue doing at home. So yeah, because I just thought it was so beneficial for people, to get up in the morning and just move. It'll make you feel better. And it started off just something almost selfishly that me and my friends needed something, because we're like, as you said, I'm a massive advocate for mental health and kind of helping people in that way. So it kind of went from there, really. And then we just realized that people actually really like this, so we could turn it into almost a business. So I'll carry this on now, and I probably won't go back to teaching face to face.
Oh, right. Okay, that's interesting. Right. And yes, but if it works for people, it works. Yeah. And we've all learned to recalibrate our lives, I think, a bit with all this, like this interview today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, we offer, which a lot of people didn't really know that kind of what they needed. So we offer like 10-minute classes, 15-minute classes, and half-an-hour classes, because in the house it is actually a lot harder to switch off sometimes, especially if you've got kids. So if you think, it's only going to take me 10 minutes, I'll do this. If it's an hour class, as much as a lot of people haven't got anything to do, an hour seems really daunting to switch off for an hour at home. So we'd rather people do 10 minutes a day, rather than trying to fit in an hour a week.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we go into the mental health a bit later. I sort of want to rewind a little bit and see how, so you can explain to us how your journey really from sport and rugby to yoga, maybe like a distilled version of how you got to where you are today. Could you take us back to perhaps your younger days? Was it Swansea you grew up?
I got into netball when I was in university. So my parents are really sporty. My family are really, really sporty. So my dad played rugby for Wales, and my mum actually still plays hockey for Wales. And my sister is a really talented CrossFitter, so kind of in the blood with regards to sport. And I played netball, and then just in a local game, I ruptured my Achilles. So the Achilles came off the calf muscle, so they can't operate it back on if it comes off the calf muscle. So they said, oh, you're going to be out of sport for 2 years. We can't operate it back on. So mentally then I was like, what do I do? All I've known all my life is sport. And they said, oh, you should try something called yoga to help with stability and flexibility. And I was like, what's yoga? I was like, oh, and and then straight away you Google yoga and it was like very zen, very, it just probably the polar opposite of what I did all my entire life. And I remember going to a class and I was like, I don't really think this is for me. And there was people in there like 2-3 times my age that were so good at like balancing, and I was just so bad at it. But it was just basically out of my comfort zone. But because I couldn't do anything else, I kept going, and the benefits of it outweighed kind of how much I initially enjoyed it. Which is really weird to say because it's my job now, but I didn't really enjoy it when I first started going. And then I remember one of the yoga teachers said, oh, so what kind of yoga have you tried? And I was like, what do you mean what kind? I've just tried yoga. And she's like, oh, there's a lot of different styles. And I was like, oh. So I started to go into different styles, and then there was in the class the physical part of yoga for me at the time, because at the time I felt like I didn't really need that mental like zen kind of side. So the physical side is really what drew me and what kept me going back. And I thought, oh, it would be really good. There must be way more people like me that kind of need yoga that don't really like it. So the physical side of yoga, I wanted to just have a class for that. So I was Googling, yoga for athletes, like, just physical side of yoga. I couldn't find anything. And I was like, oh, I'm going to create my own method. So that's basically how I ended up creating Yogability. So I knew straight away what I wanted to do with regards to, I wanted to target people that yoga may have not targeted before. So the athletes that, didn't really want the Zen side of it, needed it for, athletic performance and all of that. Don't get me wrong, it's grown loads from that now. And the more you're in yoga, the more like, even like my biggest like rugby stars, they love the relaxation now. Whereas if I went in initially with that, they probably wouldn't have tried it and they wouldn't have liked it. But that's kind of how it started. And yeah, it's just grown from there, really.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and I think, the idea of yoga, until probably a couple of years back, I always thought it was a very niche, perhaps, these very Zen people in middle age, perhaps, and it wasn't for me. But so I think what you've done is sort of opened it up to people, to more athletes. I think I read somewhere you said about rugby players that they're not the most supple people, you said, I think. Yeah. So this is really, it's invited, it's a broad church then, and you've opened it up.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, just talking to a couple of the rugby teams that I work with, they said it was really hard trying to get a yoga teacher in that isn't into sport or into rugby, because they didn't really understand kind of like the injuries they'd get, or even how demanding their kind of training is. So, but because I already knew, I came in knowing kind of what they needed and what kind of thing I could deliver. So I think in that way, it's almost easier to teach someone about yoga than it is to teach them about rugby in that kind of way. But yeah, I actually really weirdly never went back to netball, and then I joined rugby myself. My dad was like, what? But it was just, it has grown from there with regards to now I teach, loads of different types of people, even people that it's quite physically demanding. Yoga's a lot harder than what people think. So I even have people that's their form of exercise, and they just do yoga, which is again is great for them, and just to get everybody moving, And I do think as well, there's so many different types of instructor. You just got to find one that suits you, because when people tell me I don't like yoga, I'm like, you just haven't found the right one for you yet.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for my own, I'm very unsupple, and I've had 2 back operations. But during the lockdown, I would click on YouTube and find someone, and 10 minutes a day, like you said, and I suddenly felt better, and I think I felt, mentally and bodily. So it's almost like, I was going to ask you, do you think it's there for, which you've sort of answered, it's there for different reasons? There was something, my feet were cold a couple of weeks back, so I Googled yoga for circulation, and there it is, So yoga for rugby players, yoga for netball players, yoga for dancers. So do you find that,
Oh,
of,
definitely. The one thing I did, so the Welsh gymnastics wanted me to teach them, and then I was like trying to do a move, and they were like, "What's next?" I was like, "Oh no, this is the move." Like they're so,
yeah,
they're so supple and strong. But yeah,
yeah,
there's definitely yoga for everything really. And like we're saying, you just got to find something that suits you, and even what you need that day, because there is even, the stress levels at the moment, just calm it down a bit. So we teach a style called yin or restorative, which is just to give people a break. And and I think in the way, I know we'll touch it later on probably with a meditation kind of style. Like I think people don't really understand what meditation is. They think they need to empty their mind and sit down and not think of anything. But it's not actually that. It's just being present in the moment.
yeah,
And yoga's really good with that, because even if you're doing a flow, which is a link of movements, which is the main part of the class, you focus on what you're doing at the time, which actually is a form of meditation because you're in the present and you're focusing on what you're doing. Same with a relaxation. When we guide people through breathing, they're focusing on their breath. So they're bringing themselves into the present, which is, so as much as I still don't teach the, almost like if people would say the stereotypical Zen side of yoga, they're still getting their meditation. They just don't realize it, I think.
yeah, because
So
of the movement, and as you said, being in present in that moment, and sort of it's that flow, isn't it, of the mind
yeah.
and body, but also being able to relax and just go with that sort of it's a calmness, isn't it? It's a calmness from doing something you enjoy as well, perhaps.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. And
Mm.
everyone's like, "Oh, you're so chilled." I'm like, "Yeah, well, I teach yoga for a living. Of course, I'm chilled."
Yeah, yeah. You don't often find a really hyperactive, stressed
No.
out yoga teacher, do you? No.
No, not at all.
Okay. That's really interesting. I think it's a nice little point to talk about maybe the mental health benefits, really, because I think that's really fascinating and so important. So yeah, so could you perhaps explore a little bit about how you think yoga can impact our mental health and well-being, and perhaps how it's affected you along the way?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's loads of different, so you meet loads of different people that may have got into yoga because of, mental health issues in the past, and, the anxiety side of it, and the stress. But this, I know it sounds, and I'm a massive advocate of yoga, don't get me, because it's obviously my job, my business, but it, no matter what you struggle with mental health wise, yoga can actually help you. And I do think so. Mental well-being has a massive link with physical well-being. So if you're talking about, so I'm massively an advocate for physical strength, because I think it automatically helps with mental strength. So even with yoga, if you're doing a style that's maybe a little bit more of that strength kind of style, by becoming physically stronger, your mentality changed is, and you feel mentally stronger as well. You feel more robust. And the same with, if you're, if you are stressed, and if you need to slow things down, your work life and the family life are really, I guess, a stressful environment. By slowing it down, that'll calm your mind. So when you're slowing down your physical practice, it can slow everything down mentally as well. So it's just, people, I don't think, understand the link between physically what you're doing and mentally. And even if it is just, so I really recommend moving in the morning, because I think it changes your mindset for the day.
Yeah.
Even though some people hate the morning, like my sister hates the mornings, but when she moves in the morning, she just feels better all day. You feel like you've done something. You may feel a little bit more active because you've actually been active in the morning. So I think it's just important to have that, remember the link between the two. And I think that's why yoga's been so beneficial for people at home, because they can do it at home.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, that's beautifully articulated, really. A book that I came across, I don't know if you come across that, it's called
Oh no.
The Athlete's Way by Christopher Bergland, and he talks about all these things. He's actually started off as an ultra marathon runner, which are quite
Oh
amazing
wow.
athletes, aren't they?
Yeah.
But those sort of books, yeah, stimulating you into just trying different things. And like you say, just by moving and stretching in the morning, the blood flows, your brain sort of wakes up a little bit. You get that sort of dopamine hit, perhaps.
Oh,
And
definitely.
it's fascinating. So you said you've already done 4 classes this morning, and it's 10:30. So that's
Yeah.
great. How do you ever burn out from yoga and teaching? Do you ever find you have to take time out?
Yeah, I struggled more with when I only retired from like rugby last week, but when I was in camp, I mean, it's really different now that I work from home.
Mm.
It's actually because I actually really worry about people now that because everyone's working from home, their lifestyle's gone from probably quite active to really sedentary because everyone's on their laptop all the time. So I feel like I'm really lucky with my job that I have to move because even on the days I don't feel like it, and I always say this, on the days I don't feel like it, as soon as I do it, I feel better. And I know I will, but even trying to get myself to do it, I have to because it's my job. It is still hard. The way I've struggled, I think in the past is say we'd finish training at 10 p.m. I'd come home. You've always got a buzz from training, so I'd struggle to sleep, and then I'd have to get up at 5:30. And I think it's more like the lifestyle rather than the actual physical practice. But my method called Yogability, it is actually it is hard. It's a hard style of class, but obviously I do it about 7 times a day sometimes, so it's not as hard for me.
No,
And I know what's coming next. So if I'm really struggling that day, I'm like, we're gonna chill it out. We're gonna have more of a chill session today. And to be honest, I do think there's such thing called there is obviously such thing called hypermobility, which is actually you can be too mobile. So that's why I really focus on too flexible. That's why I focus on the strength side of it all the time, because I think it's really important to be stable and to be strong as well as flexible. So I'm lucky, I guess, with my style, it's not overstretching either. So it's I mean, it is sometimes I feel really drained from it, but I think it's just the nature of I guess teaching a lot, but then I'd rather be busy than bored.
Definitely, yeah. Would you like to see sort of like, people perhaps who go to the doctors with depression, anxiety, stress, this idea of social prescribing? Do you think if more people perhaps could be, passed on to groups like yourselves and teachers, that we'd have a better society, really? Do you think we should move forward like that?
Oh, definitely. And I think what's hard, one of my friends actually, she's massively into exercise, and she said, oh, people come, she's a GP, and she said, oh, people come to me with a sore shoulder, and so she gives them rehab exercises that I may have given her, and she's like, oh, people hate it, people want tablets, or people want something. So it's hard because you want kind of a quick fix, and as much as I've been doing this for 6 years, so I know the benefits of it, and I can preach it from the rooftops. But people have to do it to understand the benefits of it. But I would love to see more people getting into exercise and getting into even like going out for walks, and it is I think probably one of the best things that we could probably start off recommending is yoga, because there's so many different styles. So absolutely everybody can do a version of yoga, and I think that's different than if you're telling someone to go for a run, or if you're trying to get them to do exercise like maybe like a high intensity class. Like, it's not going to suit everybody, but there are different variations of yoga, which is I think is really important for people to know.
Yeah, I like that about yoga, because you can, you watch some people and I think I'm never going to do that stretch or that movement, but you can do it at your own level, and yet you're still engaging with it. And I think that's quite, good for the soul a bit, that you can hit it on a level which suits you, but you are pushing yourself a bit as well, sort of thing. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And I think even when people start the classes, they're like, this is so hard. It's too hard for me to do. But then when they're able to do it, they're like, amazing, I couldn't do this last week, or I couldn't do this. And it is getting used to the moves as well. So the first class you ever do, you're probably thinking, I'm never doing that again. But it's the way, it's getting used to how people instruct, it's getting used to the moves. So, that's what's really hard, is trying to get people to stick at it for, a couple of months, and then you can make a decision on, okay, maybe this isn't for you, or, it's trying to get people to do it. And to be honest, I think that's what was really beneficial in lockdown. It took a pandemic for even my friends to try it. They were like, okay, I've actually got nothing else to do. I may as well jump in. And my friends were saying, oh, my husband's downstairs doing a yoga class. And, people that would never have come to the studio, they'll do it in their house, because either that they don't want to go to the studio, haven't got time, because it does take, like, if you're going to do an hour class, it takes 3 hours out of your day. It's not just the hours,
Yeah.
the travel and everything.
Yeah.
So I think online, it was just really good to get people to try it, and you know, get people that would never have come to the studio before to do it.
Yeah, definitely very accessible, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing I was going to ask you about, because I like what you quote, and I think it's very pertinent. You said about bringing up our daughters, replacing the glass slipper with smashing glass ceilings, and I thought it's a great
Yeah.
quote. And do you want to talk a little bit about your take on that? And
Yeah.
obviously, yeah, you.
Well, yeah, I'm all for, you know, women knowing their worth, and they can do everything. And that's why I'm a massive advocate of, you know, women to get strong. And I think I was brought up always knowing that I could do anything. And I don't know whether that's because, you know, my parents, like I said, are really sporty, or I think when you're in the kind of rugby world, you are fighting against a little bit of equality. So
Yeah.
we're very much for the fight of the women, and I think that's what I wanted to do was, you know, when I couldn't find a yoga method maybe that I liked, rather than, okay, well, settling back into my job, I was like, no, I can make it myself. And I made it myself, and I think that's what I'd love more people to do. I'd love them to be more, you know, just knowing that they can do anything that they want to do.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need. It's yeah, and just showing
Yeah,
more
yeah, and
confidence.
even the
Yeah,
confidence to do it. Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, is getting the confidence that they can do whatever they set out to do.
great.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So look, yeah, yeah. I suppose a bit of a broader sort of vision, really. What would you like to see, you know, post lockdown as we come out of this now? What sort of society engaging with mental health? Perhaps more exercise, because there is an obesity crisis, I think, out there,
Yeah.
and fast foods. Because I was thinking, you know, so many shops have had to close, but McDonald's, KFC, they're all open, aren't they? Sort of thing, you know. So it's I wondered.
Yeah.
So I just wondered what you think about, if you had a magic wand,
Yeah.
how would you like to see Wales perhaps grow as a society
I
now?
think the importance of, yeah, it's
Mm,
hard, because the importance of, you know, battling obesity is just, I think, is so underrated. How much even like a walk a day can help, or like joining a gym. I just hope
mm,
people really carry on. I think it has changed the fitness industry, so a lot of things are more accessible. So even if it was like time an issue, or they're in work, they work shifts, so they don't have a membership, I hope that the online kind of community always continues, because it's more accessible for everybody.
yeah.
I just really hope that people, by having stuff taken away from them, I hope it's made them appreciate everything a little bit more. So it's hard that
Mm,
to try and get people that aren't into exercise to exercise. So I hope they go for walks with their friends more, or do anything like that. It's really hard when like you're saying, when they open things like McDonald's, but then they don't, you know, they don't open anything else.
mm,
Even like cafes who are trying to even be a little bit
yeah,
healthier and be more conscious. But
yeah,
yeah, I really hope that the society we had before is kind of left behind. I think flexible working,
mm,
again, is really beneficial, because, you know, maybe you don't want to go for a walk before work, but maybe mid-morning, if you can go for a walk mid-morning, grab a coffee, come back. I think anything like that would help. But I think they need to educate up people a lot more about the importance of staying active and being healthy, and that's physically and mentally. And I think that's where actually it gets lost in translation, is people don't understand, and people haven't been taught, so how are they expected to understand?
yeah. Some great points there. Yeah, very, yeah. And I like what you said about, by having things taken away, you know, have we appreciated, you know, are we more, you know, grateful for things in life?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting point, really. Yeah.
And I
Mm,
think as well, when the rates of, you know, the if you were obese, the almost the effects of coronavirus were more
yeah.
detrimental, then even that should be almost like a shock to people, to know that is actually no benefit to being obese.
Yeah, and of course, you know, going back to the yoga, you know, it welcomes anyone. You can start from zero
Yeah.
with yoga and a bit of stretching, and then You know, I think I've seen some great YouTubes on YouTube stories of people who just changed their lives.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, I've seen a lot like that. It is really good.
So I wondered if you would like to offer us any good little tips of what we can do as a starting point for dealing with our physical and mental health. If you've got a few tricks up your sleeve.
Well, I always say just start small. Don't jump in thinking, right, I'm going to do an hour a day, because it's just not, you're probably not going to sustain it. So I would try and get aims that you could probably reach. So I always wake up, have a coffee in the morning. I love my morning coffee, so I appreciate that. And then I may do 10 minutes of yoga a day. And if you did that 3 times a week to start, it's not much time out of your day. So I would try and just start small. So there's loads on YouTube. So just even type in 10 minutes of yoga or whatever, and just start small. Start to basically just try and everyone's got to be a beginner before they can be anything else. So don't worry if you're finding it hard, or it's too hard for you. Just find maybe a session that you can do 10 minutes 3 times a week, and then you can grow from there. And I think that's probably the main part, is just try not to jump in too deep.
That's a great start, I think. Yes. I got a quote I was going to share with you, because I always try to find a quote for each one. James Baldwin, who's a great American writer, he said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Do you think that ties into exercise and what you're trying to do as well?
To start it is the hardest part.
Yeah.
Unless you face a challenge head on, it's so hard. And that's why I think, in a way, it's you've got to just almost not focus on what you're doing now, focus on the main aim and where you actually want to reach, because unless you face a challenge, you're never going to get to that end point. But people want to get to that end point, and like we were talking about with GPs and everything, they kind of want a tablet that they can reach the end point without the work. But it takes work, and no one wants to hear that, really, because they just want to reach the end goal, but it takes hard work. And I think by knowing that even if you are struggling to start, then the struggle doesn't last. Nothing really lasts. And even the 10 minutes, if you're hating that 10 minutes, it stops after 10 minutes. Whereas the benefits of it, though, it carries on. So I do think that it's remembering why you're doing what you're doing, not necessarily focusing on how hard it is at the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right. I think as a society, we want these, it's like instant fame, instant money, etc. But, it's a long journey, and being a sports person, exactly that journey. It's a battle. And health. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, one of my favorite quotes is, "It's what you do in the dark that puts you in the light." Because people don't see the hard kind of work that you put into it. They just see, if we're talking about rugby, they just see you playing for Wales on the weekend. They don't see everything that goes into it. And the same with, if you're starting your yoga journey, or if you're starting your weight loss journey or anything, they don't see the hard work. They'll see the reward at the end of it. And you feel like you're the only person struggling, but you're not. And all of these people that you look up to have been there.
That's right. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and if people are struggling, just remember they're not on their own. So many people are struggling, and as much as everyone says, "Oh, you're always really positive," I'm like, well, I cried watching Friends yesterday. You just don't see that side of social media, and I think that's what's hard with social media as well. You just see the good side of stuff. So just remember, you're not alone. And if anyone's got any questions, just let me know.
Thanks, Alex. It's been a great interview.
No worries.
Really.